Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Coach's Corner. We're going to let our guests uh, come on screen here in just a minute. So this is a pre-recorded episode that we're doing. With scheduling being the way it is, this is something we figured we'd give a shot and try. And we understand that we love having everybody making the live comments on our usual live broadcasts. But if you go ahead and leave comments in the comment section below the video, if you have any questions, we will definitely get back to you and answer those questions. So tonight, the episode we're talking about is the transition crowns in these times of plague. It's been a rough 2 years, and the society had recently said that all the crowns needed to be transitioned by January 31st, and that was after not having any events for most of 2020 and 2021. And there were some crowns that were on the thrones for 2 years. I know here in Artemisia it was like 18 months. So there were some folks that were on the thrones for a long, long time. And there are several of us here tonight who decided to enter crown following those that had been on the thrones for a while. The folks that had been on the thrones for that time, most of them had no idea what was coming. There was no way to foresee that they were going to be on the thrones for as long as they had. And so coming out of this, there's most of the crowns are transitioned now. And it's been, those that are taking up the crowns at this time definitely know what they're getting into, having seen what's been going on for the last couple of years. And we're fortunate to have several of us who are in that transition reign right now. So we have His Majesty Barekr from the Outlands, who just stepped up a couple weeks ago. I have His Majesty Hirsch from Calontir, and Her Majesty Rauokinn from Ontir, and myself, I'm Sean. I'm King of Artemisia currently. And just to get the formalities out of the way, right up front, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty.
Your Majesty.
Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty.
Doctor. All right. So let's we'll do a little bit of introduction. Barekr, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and some of the things that you thought about going into this?
Yeah. Thanks a bunch, Sean. Thanks for having me come and have a conversation. I'm Barekr from the Outlands. Started in the Outlands, spent a little bit of time in North Shield, and then came back and settled in the Outlands. And obviously, I'm king there now. A lot of kind of interesting things going in. One of the things we were talking about kind of before we went live was just there's this idea that it was a position that needed to be filled. And I could see that the current king and queen had been dealing with a lot of stuff and been sitting for a long time. And when my wife and I spoke about doing the job and whether or not that was something we were excited about, we did come to the conclusion that if it was going to be a position that somebody had to do it, we wanted to do it so that we could do it joyfully, and be an example of trying to bring fun and doing the things that, some things are harder to handle now because of regulations or people or travel or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you can be kind to each other and do what you can do, stay within the guidelines and try to keep everybody safe, the happier we can be while doing that, the more fun more people are going to have. So.
And Hirsch?
I'm Hirsch. I grew up, 15th century German, grew up here in Calontir. I've lived in Calontir my whole life, although we have traveled all over not all over the world, but from the west to Drachenwald. I've really enjoyed traveling. My wife Magdalena is also grown up in Calontir as well, and has been my queen for for both of our previous reigns. And so, that's actually a fantastic benefit from my perspective, is that it's not a new, hey, how does this work with this person thing. It's, we know what we're doing as a team approaching this reign. But as for my history, my career, knight, one trick pony, I guess you'd say. Magdalena is a laurel as well as a pelican, so we really do carry a lot of breadth across all the orders. And honestly, I look to her for a lot of experience on things like that. As far as the decision to step up was, I could talk more about that, but like Barekr said, the seriousness of the job is important to do right. But I believe that, felt very strongly that there's a way to do it in a way that we still get to have as much fun as we can, while still treating the times we're in, the times we're very much hoping to get through and out of, with seriousness. So that's the real balancing act. And that's a little bit about me. Thanks.
And Riskin, you're muted every time.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. I'm Rithkin. I did not fight and win. I fought in the crown, but my Sven won the tournament. We have been, he's not my husband, we're friends. And we've been fighting for each other for I guess more than 10 years now, off and on. We have a pretty good partnership team. He's been king 5 times before of Ontir, but he has not reigned, I think, in 13 years. It might be less than that. And so one of the hard things in Ontir was that people were sort of getting like event cancellation fatigue. I think our crown got canceled, I don't know, 5 times. And then when the bod told us that we had to have a crown, I think they actually told our kingdom, you have to have a crown. The crown was set up, and I think we only had like a month of lead time on it. And at first we weren't going to fight in the crown. And then I really did some self-reflection, and Sven did some self-reflection, and we decided that it didn't have to be us, but whoever decided to really go for this crown really needed to be aware that this was going to be different, and that there was going to be a need to be creative, and a need to do some things that maybe we don't always do, because in Ontir, we have a rich history, and everybody enters crown. Our crowns are usually 70 to 110 people. And this crown was only 35. So there was a very real chance, that really, maybe somebody unexpected could win, and maybe somebody that hadn't really thought about how the reign was going to be different, or what might be needed. So we just did some soul searching and decided that we were both invested in having the kingdom go forward in a healthy way. And so we went for it.
Yeah, I'm working on, there we go. Great. Thank you all for giving us a little insight on that thought process. Likewise, us coming into this list as well, we really felt like it would be best to have some experience on the thrones. And I think Barracks the only one of us that is doing strictly first time reign. But I really love what you were saying about doing it joyfully, right? We knew coming into this that I know from our perspective, we knew that there was a possibility that we get shut down again, right? And as it is with the Omicron variant rearing up the last couple of weeks, we've had 2 events this month that have been canceled. One last minute, and then another group decided that they just didn't want to hope for an event. So, to Rifkin's point there, I mean, it's that cancellation fatigue, right? There's, as things kind of got started, there's, the crown that I won was the first event that we had at all since the beginning of this. And at first it was like, oh, we'll be shut down for 30 days and then 60 days. And then, oh shit, we're not going to be doing events for a while. And everything shut down. So this is the first event that we had was Crown. And it was kind of a narrow window of opportunity for us to be able to have events at all. And, an opportunity for us to find errors. Because Damon and Veronique, our predecessors, had stepped up. Their predecessors, Lachlan and Vigdis, were like stayed on for about a month past when coronation was supposed to happen. Again with the, we should be able to have events again soon, and then all of a sudden we're not. And so Damon and Veronique picked it up, and they never had an opportunity to find errors after that. There were a number of crowns that had errors when this all started happening, and they were able to kind of like down in Aidenvelt where Zipser and Minako have been errors for more than a year. But we didn't have that opportunity. So ours was the first chance that we had to have an event at all. And you have the one, and it's great, and it feels good, and it's fun, and then you're like, can we have another event? Is that a thing that we can do?
Just spend the next 5 days just kind of dreading and waiting the explosion on Facebook of everyone to get it or something. I know that feeling well.
Right. And so, yeah, that event fatigue, that event cancellation fatigue was crippling for a lot of people. So I think Hirsch, you had something to say too?
Yeah, I had so the context for deciding to fight in this crown had actually goes back a little more than 2 years for me, because Magdalena and I had decided that this would be fun to do again, and I was very serious in the crown tournament that Lucian won for Tamar. And right before Gulf, wrote my letter of intent for their crown tournament that was canceled when Gulf Wars was canceled, when the pandemic, when the first lockdown happened. So when we were deciding, do we want to do this again? My very first thought was, what's changed since I wrote that letter last time? And it's like, well, a lot of things have changed. We've got pandemic times, we've got all these things to deal with, but I'm still prepared. And I actually got more serious about my fitness because of all the things that were obvious to me in the prior crown tournament. My aerobic fitness was not very good. And inspired by Magdalena, I actually took up running. In spite of the fact that I have had 3 knee surgeries, I found that the things I was doing were not giving me a bump in my aerobic fitness. And so I started running. And part of it was because I committed to a 5K, but part of it was because I was like, you know what? My aerobic fitness needs to be better for crown. And it helped. It definitely didn't hurt. I found myself standing on the sidelines, bouncing up and down just to keep my heart rate up. And, those were all related to the decision to fight in crown, but the essence of it goes right back to, I wrote a letter before it was canceled, and what's changed, what's different. Lucian and Tamar are still dear friends, and they absolutely needed relief. And we were still absolutely prepared and ready to step forward and absolutely excited to do so. Couldn't have been more pleased. So that's the full tale to the context of my decision to fight seriously in crown tournament. Something I never talk about before the tournament.
Barracks?
Hirsch kind of setting that stage kind of brought to mind kind of a similarity, kind of parallels. I had been very, very focused on winning the crown. That was, I think, our crown was the first weekend that events got canceled. It was kind of early in March, I think, and I had a friend of mine who was working with me almost daily for a while. I was very sharpened. I've been working through kind of applying my mundane martial art to SCA rules, and seeing how closely I could map kind of what I was doing in my martial art to our game, and having a lot of success. And when it got canceled, it was kind of interesting. I had so far, I guess for background for me, yeah, this is my first crown. I've been a knight for about 9 years. Definitely kind of fighting has been most of what I have done. But I've also never really had much in the way of like goals or specific tournaments I had to win, until the crown that I had signed up for in order to make Beatrice a queen. And when it got canceled, I very much felt like a rope that had been made too tight and then just exploded. And I lost all of my motivation for doing any kind of Pell work, or, even wanting to try to hook up with somebody to just us two be in their backyard and get some work done for a good portion of that first year. Played a lot of banjo, but and as it kind of came around, we started to hear that we were going to have another crown, and he was and Bela had basically put out, he was like, it's been long enough, things are different enough, I'm just reopening the letters, and so re-put them in if you want. And there was very much not there was no hard feelings either way. And we talked about it back and forth, made the decision to go back into it, but I was kind of at a deficit of having kind of been a little petulant for a while, moving up to it. And so getting back into, luckily I hadn't forsaken all of my my training. I still had my dad coming over, and who has been my martial arts instructor since I was 5. We would still work, and so still maintaining some of the mindset, but it was like a 2 or 3 week kind of really ramped up training regimen that I went on, and ended up actually having a friend come over and kind of do the whole corner coach thing for me for about a week. And I got a lot of comments and just kind of intriguing looks on the tournament day. Many people likened it to actually watching an MMA fight, because I had the full kit and caboodle. I had a guy that was giving me a little Dixie cup of water, and then he would make me eat an orange. I wasn't concentrated on putting my armor on, or there was nothing that I had to have in my head except for the next target.
Did you bring your own card girls?
No, couldn't find any. But that was an interesting level of intensity that I haven't necessarily seen from anyone else. I've definitely never done it before, but it certainly brought, I don't know, energy and drive to the whole day. Just having that kind of, I felt very much like a race car who was being tuned by my pit crew, and it was cool. I definitely had a very good day. So
yeah, you pretty much destroyed everybody.
It was a good day for me. It was like looking through a fisheye lens, and every once in a while, most of the time it was my coach telling me what I needed to think about for the next match, drink this little 2 sips of coffee, and then every once in a while it was my opponent and just executing. So definitely I would suggest it. If you want to win a tournament, go that route.
It's a good feeling. All right, Rauokinn.
Well, Sven and I have been working toward this goal for a long time. So I think he's finaled twice in the 2 years before the pandemic. So he had been training and I had been training. We both, we both wanted to win for each other. But once, and then after that one, we made a group on Facebook, a training group with, I think it was just 3 of us. And we sort of motivated each other. And then the pandemic happened. And I think both of us immediately had sort of fighting pods or bubbles. And he had a pretty good one out where he lives. He's got some pretty good fighters out there. But again, I mean, when you are ramping up for a crown and then it gets canceled and then you ramp up again and it gets canceled, it's really, really hard to keep your motivation. I mean, both of us did a lot of physical fitness over the pandemic. I look like a different person now. He is probably what a lot of people would call a super duke. And he was even doing PEL work before, and he did a lot of PEL work back in the day, but he's got a really good foundation and he can fight at a pretty high level without having to do that kind of PEL work. But he was motivated to do this. So, I mean, there was a lot of training going on. We put on a couple of like unofficial sort of fight things that we did maybe every couple of months when in that summer when probably we should have had events and in our kingdom didn't have events, with like missed our window. So we had some non-events that were fighting focused. And one of them, I think we had people from at least 5 or 6 different kingdoms there, and it was all fighting focused, and it was super fun, and that was a really great way to train. So like we kept doing a lot of the training that we had been doing before. It was just on a very micro level, I guess. But I wanted to sort of piggyback on Sean's thing, like that our crown was our first event as well as a kingdom since like March 2020, and it was October 2021. And it wasn't even like a real event. It was limited attendance. You could only attend if you were required or you were fighting in it or you were being fought for. It was a very weird vibe. And it was sort of, I have to admit, like it didn't really feel real for a while because you never knew if you were actually going to get to go to something or if things were going to happen. Like I honestly, like until the day before 12th night, which is when we stepped up at the beginning of the month, I still thought we were going to not get a coronation. So, it's a very odd time to be reigning, but also it's a very kind of cool time if you decide to take some of the online resources and really sort of say, hey, what can we do with this stuff to use it in a more positive way and in a way where we can engage people better and deal with sort of some of the online Zoom fatigue and other things and use it more in a positive way. Like one of the things in our kingdom is that most of the announcements and stuff from kingdom were all banishments or negative things. And I think people, and that's not anybody's fault. I'm not criticizing the crown before us, but I think it really sort of dampens people's spirits when we're sort of putting our lives on hold, or our SEA lives. And for a lot of us, that's our social life, while we wait for things to open up. And I think going into this crown, it was really important to say, hey, we're not going to wait for things to open up. We're going to get creative on how to re-engage people and get people enthusiastic and use sort of a hybrid model of online and in person to really sort of use that to the best possible way.
Rauokinn, the things you said about motivation, finding your motivation, you and Sean, you and Sven, both finding your motivation, resonates a lot with me. And, early in the shutdown, everything shut down. yes, I was working remotely, but the hobby was just over. And, trying to maintain some motivation for that and getting through that first deep valley of dark times and finding, for myself, for our family, that motivation to do things and get excited, get that inspiration to do things was refreshing. And there are plenty of people still today who have just sort of said, not doing the SCA until, whatever. And that's fine for them. But once I recognized that I was very motivated, it was delightful because and frankly, I had some of the benefits that many others didn't. When people talk about being alone and not getting to fight, it's like, well, my household pod of 4 had 3 fighters in it because 2 of my sons are Fearedmen of Calontir and Squires. And, anytime I wanted, I could just be like, hey, it's not raining. Let's go put on armor and fight for 40 minutes and have fighter practice with people that are living and breathing the same air as myself. So that particular lull, which frankly, we didn't do it as often as we could have. I look back on that. It's like, I definitely could have, tried to push that envelope a little more. And we did a couple private practices in the summer that were small groups, distance, I would say great swords only, but it wasn't. I mean, honestly, that's what the 6-foot rule means, right? This is my favorite joke. But the other thing that's not a joke is when we stepped up, our expectation was we're going to try to transition out of this and it's going to be, a return to normality. And right now we're still in the thick of it and we don't know that, so, we thought our coronation might get canceled. We thought we might have to be the ones to cancel coronation. We really didn't want to, and it went smoothly. And I'm really grateful that that went smoothly. But the other joke at the time is like, oh yeah, get ready for another 2 years. Is like, I hope not. I sure hope not. But that's so far, that's still kind of a funny joke. But now I forgot the other joke. That's my sense of humor. So, but the motivation part and being inspired is actually a big deal. And Barekr, when you talked about you've been a knight for 9 years, I did the math. I was a knight for 14, my first crown, and it took me. Rauokinn, you mentioned the training and the motivation to really work at it. I counted because my wife and I were Baron and Baroness, and I entered crown a couple times, but I wasn't serious about it. And after we stepped down, I got serious about it. And I was serious about entering crown for 6 years. And that's how long it took for me to recognize that I needed to work on it, what I needed to do to work on it, and to do the work to get there. And, not the 3 prior, but I came in second 3 times in a row. And that was a wake-up call. So it's like, but my the motivation piece I consider to be very personal. So you want everyone to find their own motivation, because what works for one person doesn't always work for another. And I find that meshes with for myself, for my tournament headspace. My head game is sometimes kind of precarious. And sometimes it is rock solid and I'm very focused. But other times it's like one little thing and I'm squirrel. I'm not focused anymore. So that just depends. This past ground tournament, I was absolutely very focused. The previous one as well, I was very focused. I had a very solid head game because my motivation was very clear and complete. But that's what I think that is really the hard part of these dark times, these cold times and pandemic times, is trying to help everybody find their own motivation to do what they can to have fun. It's really hard.
Yeah, likewise, going into this list, we had decided right before the pandemic, right before the shutdown, we decided that we were going to enter as well. There were just there were a number of things that were going on in the kingdom. Nothing bad in particular, but just some things that we were interested in just having some influence. And I always like to have our lists to be clean and contested. And there were some lists that were, kind of coming up with some anniversaries and celebrations that would be, coming down the pike, that I just wanted to make sure that do my best to make sure that those lists were clean and contested as best we could. So once we decided to enter, we were, pretty well ready to go. And then, then everything got shut down. And so like Hirsch was saying, we had decided to enter previously. And having won crown a few times, I have to think about the crowns that I'm going to enter and whether or not I have the time to do the job. And once my wife decides that it's time, once she gives me the green light, we'll pretty much be in crown until we win at that point. But the circumstances were very, very different from, we'll go in and take a shot at it, to we need to do this. Like we need to at least be part of the equation. I'm never going to sacrifice my integrity to make sure that I win a particular list. I've always said that I think it's dangerous for somebody to go into a list with an agenda. Anytime you go in saying, well, I have to win this crown so that I can do this thing. I think that's a bad idea. And I think it lends itself to fabricating victories where they do not truly exist. I just think it's a dangerous thing to do. And so the motivation entering this crown was different, and it was kind of weird, because there was so much riding on this, because I really felt that we needed to have a steady hand at the wheel for this transition. I think the experience, and I know, at least for us, that experience paid off early, right off the bat. Having that experience to, because among other things, when we won crown, coronation was going to be 2 months down the road, which for us is a short time, right? I know on tiers May to July. You guys only have like 6 weeks for that. I know there's some kingdoms that have a pretty short transition, but 2 months for us. We usually have 5 months as prince and princess, and I think Calontir is the same way.
Not exactly.
But
Our first reign, we had 9 weeks, and we did change that schedule so that it was closer to 3 months. It's been about 2.5, 3 months for quite a while right now.
Yeah. So it was kind of a short time for us, but also when we won crown, we didn't know where coronation was going to be. So we had to figure that out on the way home from the event, from winning crown. Like, okay, so where's coronation going to be? Nobody knows. And so being able to negotiate that on the way home from winning crown, and then having, we ended up, our coronation was originally scheduled to be on Labor Day weekend, but 2 months in, at the end of pandemic, there was no time. Like, we couldn't find sites anywhere in the kingdom for Labor Day weekend, right? So, because everybody, now that we can like socialize again and have events again, now every other nonprofit organization is trying to get their events on the holiday weekends too. So that was one of those things where, right off the bat, it's like, we got to figure out how to do this. So going into it, like I said, I don't like having an agenda going into it, but at the same time, there's a lot riding on this particular crown. And it was, it was the drive and the motivation. Suddenly it's not just, we'll fight the list and see how it goes. Suddenly it matters more than some of the crowns had before. So um, did any of you guys kind of experience that sort of thing? How is it different on the day of? What's like, what are you thinking the day of as it's going on? How's that different from other crowds that you've been in? I know we talked a little bit about preparation before, but like I said, this list was different. Was it just me?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I've only fought in one other crown. And that was, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, maybe a little longer. So I've always kind of taken the sword oath maybe a little too seriously, but I fight as hard as I can, and if I can win, I will probably win that day. At least that's how I approach it mentally. And so entering into the crown, it wasn't necessarily different than previous crowns, but I can say it definitely changed the whole thought process when Beatrice got offered before the tournament started. That was definitely a little interesting for the thought process of everything. But I knew that whoever won was going to have a lot of work to do. And I could tell, like certain people were fighting for one reason or another. And just based on the people who were there was really only a couple of options of likelihood of who was going to win. And when it came down to that, I just thought, like I said at the beginning, I thought that Sadie and I could bring a little more excitement and had more energy in the tank than some of the other contenders. And so I knew from very early on, like I tried, I've definitely struggled with adrenaline making me miss shots here and there. And that's part of why I wear as little armor as I do. But at the same time, it's from a purely fight philosophy perspective, Sean is completely right. You should never have a specific agenda in mind, because that gets in the way of the whole no mind, full relaxation philosophy. But I will definitely admit there was definitely a drive there to win, to best each individual person, because I felt honestly on the day that I could do the job better than other people could. So that was kind of where my head was at with it.
Yeah. So let me ask this. So after, again, going into this list, we all knew what's at stake. We all knew what it was we were getting into. What are some of your priorities after winning Crown? You have that time between Crown and Coronation. Besides getting all your German garb done there, Rifkin, which was magnificent, by the way.
I think it's Shaxi for that.
Yeah. Sven was styling.
Yeah.
So what are some of the priorities? Because I know for me it was like we need to get back to, like Hirsch said, right? Get back to normal, right? But what does normal look like, and what are some of the priorities and how we're going to transition that and how to get back to it? Hirsch, you want to start with that?
Sure. So the very first priority is quite frankly health of the kingdom, and I mean that from a population, emotional health. But when we say we want to get back to having events, it's because it's what we do, and we want them to be fun. We want people to show up excited, and we want the kingdom to be healthy with people and everything that we're doing. Magda's going to join us for a minute.
I'm just going to
What's our
wait.
priority?
Hey, Magda.
Hey. Like I've got.
Will the real Magdalena please stand up?
That's why I'm go up my right tippy
I
toe.
am standing.
So, we've got quite a few things to do. Giving some relief to Lucia and Tamar was absolutely on our mind as far as we knew that they were doing a fantastic job, but that they were ready to be done. And trying to make sure that we are having fun while making sure the kingdom's healthy. And there's, you mentioned, we were talking about arts and sciences, and frankly, all of the officers have been doing their jobs. One of the Watan meeting right after Crown Tournament, the exchequer's like, well, everything's shut down, but we still have to do quarterly reports. It's like, oh my gosh, that's that's a lot of work. And we think that a lot of us are checking out and doing, we're just not going to do the SCA. But if the SCA is still going to be here for people to come back to, and I've been saying for years that one of the nice things about the SCA is you can step away from it, you can come back, it'll still be there. Well, it won't if we don't keep it going during pandemic times. So that's pretty important to me at a kingdom level. That was really our priority. There was one other thing I was going to say about tone. You asked about tone on the day of, Sean, and I actually thought that it was a fabulous, almost normal Crown Tournament. The turnout was not our lowest, definitely not our highest as far as numbers, but it was a gorgeous day, and the ambiance was fantastic. The fights were focused and clean. Communication was good. Thank goodness communication was good. I would have missed a shot if there wasn't good communication. But the whole day actually seemed less like pandemic times to me. Maybe part of that was because I was over preparing a little and fighting with a mask on. People were like, why are you fighting? We don't have to wear masks. I'm like, we might have to. I don't know. So I fought with a mask on for almost every event leading up to Crown Tournament in October. So throughout the whole summer, I was typically fighting in a mask. And it's not fun. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's doable, but it's definitely not ideal. So, all right, Rifkin.
Yeah, I want to go back to the tone too. We got a lot of pressure before the tournament, at the tournament, about winning or being, people wanted us to win. And like, I'm sort of used to that, and sort of being, a female knight, that, I've gotten pressure like that, but I hadn't gotten it to that extent. And I didn't actually pass it along to Sven. I sort of internalized it, which is probably why my fighting day wasn't all that awesome. But
Sven's like, woohoo, I got to fight.
Yeah. But there was a lot of pressure. And, people were looking at how engaged my sister and I had been online on behalf of the kingdom, and sort of doing, like, unintentionally, sort of an on-tier history project through our interviews. And then they were seeing how much experience Sven had, and they were thinking, wow, like, she's engaged and he has all this experience, they would be a really good team, right? So we got a lot of pressure, and it was hard. But at the actual day, Sven fought so well. Like, he always fights well, but he was really unstoppable on the day of the tournament. And, I don't know how many people have watched the final, but the final was amazing. He totally dominated, and he looked like Sven, and that makes me happy, because that, I always want him to enjoy his fight and fight at his best. So on the day of, that was great, but we got a lot of pressure, and that sort of goes to and we didn't have an agenda. Like, I agree that having an agenda is a bad idea. I think the idea was that the reigning's really never about you, but this time it really wasn't about you. It was 100% about the health of the kingdom, and about really emphasizing communication and building community and using creative ways to do that. Because I don't think, I'm not about going back to normal. I would love to get there, but I think we need to embrace where we are and make the most out of it. and so that is sort of what we've focused on is, you know, we want to get back to being, you know, in person and having our big events. And but really, I mean, what events facilitate really is friendship and celebrating each other and sharing our passions. And if we can figure out the best way to do that when we can't be fully engaged in person, that is what our focus is figuring out the best way to do that in this sort of hybrid situation, and for the health of the kingdom. I just really think for us, the focus is on, and leading up to 12th night is about how can we best celebrate people? How can we best rekindle people's passions? How can we build community in a way through the computer that, you know, maybe hasn't been utilized to its best? So that's kind of where we were and where we are still. And I just, you know, every day we sort of, I'm really hoping this Omicron thing like goes down soon. But even if it doesn't, you know, like we get events canceled, and I'm reaching out to the barons and baronesses and saying, I still want to do my court. We're going to do a virtual court. How can we best do that? Can I do part of it live? Can I do some of it in person, like some of the bigger stuff? And we're really working with the technology to bring the people that are going to be awarded online to do it live, because we didn't have any live courts during the pandemic. So it's really hard to engage and with the populace when it isn't live, right? Because you can't react in a live way. So that's our focus.
Eric?
Yeah, the lot of really good points. You hit on some of the stuff that I was going to talk about. So I guess I'll kind of refine what I would say. One of our biggest goals for us has been kind of refining the communication between everyone. We're really trying to push kind of this idea of giving, you know, to Rivkin's point, right? Like more and more stuff is getting moved to online. There's text communication, there's live feeds, there's all this stuff. Trying to really encourage people to give each other the benefit of the doubt when you don't know what their tone is, you don't know what the context is, and they say something, and maybe that is initially irksome to you because of the way that you read it. Whereas if you give them the benefit of the doubt that they weren't trying to be mean or say something crappy, generally it'll just be some information that they were trying to convey. Maybe not in the, I mean, we're all nerds. We're none of us are the best at social like situations. That's probably why we do this. But kindness, like kindness in the interactions, in, you know, like there's definitely two sides of the coin, right? Like for me, if I'm going to be completely honest, deep in my soul, I don't like the idea of doing virtual courts. I don't want to necessarily encourage moving more stuff to the technology side, just from a bratty kind of, we do medieval stuff in person, like that's what we do. But recognizing that that's kind of selfish in some ways, because there's way more people that you can reach. There's way more ways to get involved. You know, and so like coming to a middle ground is going to be really important. We've certainly been shown in no uncertain terms, right, that taking a 2-year break from each other doesn't make most of us happy. But it's kind of interesting because it is kind of an artificial reset we've all been given on our preconceived notions, on the way that we've seen people. We're trying to encourage people to not just immediately go back to the way it was 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, but bear that in mind. Let's release some of the pressure that we're putting on our friends. We don't necessarily need to have, you know, I've heard a lot of people who have expressed like they really want to go to this event, but they don't feel comfortable with it for whatever reason, whether it's their health, someone else's health, any kind of number, but they feel like they can't not go because of the guilt trips or just the feeling like they're letting somebody down. I've noticed a lot of people have built up a lot of this artificial pressure on each other instead of just being happy when you can be there and being perfectly happy when you can't necessarily engage in the same way. So just remembering that we really like each other. This is a game and we are trying to keep each other safe. You know, if we give each other more of the benefit of the doubt, I think there will be less hurt feelings and less flame wars. So I think that is probably my best point. And then probably to finish it off, I guess the craziest thing has just been seeing like what Hirsch was saying. You know, the game was kind of shut down and we weren't allowed to see each other, but quarterly reports still had to get filed. And the fact is, our officers across the entire known world have been working their asses off and continue to do so. And so that was kind of something that popped into my head when you first kind of put forth what we were going to talk about tonight is, you know, in a lot of ways, as I've stepped into this role, I've noticed that a lot of the work has fallen on the officers and will continue to do so. So supporting them and making it easier, I think, is another huge priority for us.
Yeah, you know, that's something we were kind of talking about before before we go live. You know, there's, you know, heavy weapons fighting has always been the hook of the SCA. It's the thing that people see that is, you know, I mean, people in the park, you know, beating the shit out of each other with sticks. I mean, who doesn't want to be part of that, right? And it's, you know, it's exciting, it's dynamic, and it's the thing that gets people's attention and pulls them in. And then over this last 2 years, when we haven't had fighting, because we can't get together to do that except in our small pods, but you know, we can't go to wars and we can't have tournaments and that sort of stuff. So while the fighting has been reduced, it has really highlighted a lot of the folks in the arts community and a lot of the service oriented communities as well, those officers among them. So you know, like you said, Barekr, you know, I mean, hats off to those people that have worked tirelessly for 2 years without relief, right? Because I mean, you get into an office and you think you're going to do it for, you know, a 2-year term, and then, you know, you get a year into it or maybe 2 years into it, and all of a sudden you get shut down for 2 years, and you got to keep doing that job, and the paperwork still has to keep going in. And yeah, there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes, and you know, I know a lot of folks see those of us as crowns, you know, the ones that have been, you know, on the thrones during the pandemic, and those of us that are coming in after, and you know, we're kind of the face of the organization, as it were. But yeah, can't give enough credit to those folks that have been doing those jobs behind the scenes and are continuing to do those things. You know, Barekr, you I mean, you guys all mentioned it. I mean, you know, when Rauokinn was doing her interviews with the murderer dukes during the Rona years, you know, you keep asking the question, you know, what keeps you coming back, right? And the answer was always the same. It's the people, right? I mean, we're here for the people, right? And you know, and you know, to Barekr's point, when most of our interaction has been online, I actually made this statement at coronation after we stepped up, that social media is a terrible platform for conveying complex or even simple ideas. And there is a huge difference between what one person said or typed and what another person heard or read in that. And there's this huge gulf that you have in there that social media, the written word, just doesn't convey the true idea of the thought. And we'd made that point at Coronation, we stepped up to tell people, have those conversations and give each other some grace, and understand that somebody may have said something shitty and you may have responded in a shitty way to the shitty thing they said. That doesn't make either of you bad people. But there was so much animosity going on some of the online stuff that was happening, that, you know, being at events live together, you know, that's what the SCA is, right? And so that was also, you know, kind of our priority, after, you know, we had Crown, which was the first event. Of course, there's that trepidation of, are we going to be able to have more events? You know, when are we going to have to shut this down again? And you know, there's all this, you know, like Barekr was saying, this hesitation of, you know, well, I want to go, but is it safe to go? And, you know, in all this. And so one of our priorities was getting, like, as far as getting back to normal, was, okay, if we can have in-person events again, let's get those scheduled, and let's get back to getting the paperwork in on time, you know, getting those things back on a schedule, so that we can, you know, because we had been doing a lot of virtual events in our kingdom. Damon and Veronique did more than just about any other kingdom in that regard. And I'll say that and I said this the entire time, virtual events are not better than in-person events, not by any stretch of the imagination. They were just better than not having anything at all. And that was the thing that for us kept things going and kept us connected in some small way. And I am eternally grateful for, you know, Damon and Veronique, and for Fiametta, who was the tech lead on that, and for our Kingdom Seneschal, Catherine Ann, who, you know, that was a team of folks that, you know, that really kept everything going at some really, really dark times. And the online events was a big part of that. But, you know, getting back to online, or getting back to in-person events, you know, we were like, okay, let's get back to the schedule. Let's get back to getting used to the idea that your paperwork has to be in by this time in order for your event to be official, that sort of stuff. And I know for us, so like I said, the day we won Crown, we had no idea where Coronation was going to be. Crown Tourney is a month after Coronation. For us, we have 5 months as Prince and Princess. So once we figured out where we're going to have a Coronation, my next priority was going to be, I don't want to be sitting here a month from now not knowing where Crown is going to be. So, you know, we called some folks, and you know, kind of, you know, I mean, all of the paperwork and all of the procedure was like kind of in shambles, through nobody's fault. I mean, like, when you can't have actual events, like all of the paperwork just kind of falls apart, right? So we're like, okay, let's get back to let's get Crown scheduled, right? So for us, one of our, like, we have Crown early, we have it a month after Coronation. That is kind of a priority for us to establish heirs. It was really important for us to establish heirs, because we wanted another set of eyes on the decision-making process. You know, Damon and Veronique did a great job, but it was just them. They were kind of on the hook for all of these, you know, mandates and shutdowns that happen at the society level, and conveying that information, and even the Crown that we had in July. It's like, do we, don't we, it's like, you know, they had a plan, and then the bod came out and said you have to transition before the end of, you know, before January 31st, and that just totally blew their whole plan, right? I mean, it was like, and stuff like that. We wanted to have heirs to be able to have some additional input on those things, so that we know that we're doing our best to make the best decisions that we can for the kingdom, and that the people that are most invested in that, you know, our heirs, people are going to take over after us, are likewise invested in those decisions, and being able to have that. So that was pretty important for us early on, was getting that going there too. So
I think that as a society, each of our kingdoms and each of our groups and each of us individually learned a lot about how to behave online in a more courteous fashion. And when I look back at it a couple of years later, I think that many of us who were really regularly at the events, we were lazy online. We didn't work very hard at making sure everyone was more courteous. And as Barekr said, let's try to reduce the flame wars. And can't we all just get along? Well, guess what? During pandemic times, when virtual is pretty much the only way we're interacting, we absolutely have to get along. And let's try to make sure that we keep that aspect of the SCA, that our online courtesy is better than it was 2.5 years ago, because we know it wasn't great. And the barony I live in has done a really fantastic job. Like May through September, we had a number of new people showing up while we were meeting weekly outdoors. There were a lot of new people showing up, and I almost felt bad. I had a couple conversations because there were really, really small groups that were just dwindling to nearly nothing, and we're like getting 2 or 3, 4 or 5 new members a week. In some cases, they might just drop in. They weren't necessarily buying an SCA membership the first month or anything, but they were interested and they were practicing things. They were learning arts and sciences, fighting, and just talking to people. They were making social connections, and that's the first letter of the SCA. And so some of the things that we have done a little better because we had to during pandemic times are an opportunity for the SCA as a whole to be better in both places, in the real world and also in the virtual world, and to make both of those, like people said about the hybrid situation, to make both of those places better places. I think it's advanced the conversation. And I although I regret all the events we've missed, I also I'm very much a silver lining kind of guy. I want to recognize that the work that many people put into improving our virtual ecosystem is something that is an improvement. It's a benefit.
Ricken?
Yeah, I sort of want to follow up on that, because one of the things that has sort of come to the forefront during the pandemic is the whole DEI initiative, diversity, equity, inclusivity. And part of the basis of that is learning that you see things from your perspective, and you don't know what you don't know. And you can unintentionally offend people because they see things from their own perspective, or you just don't have the life experience to understand what their struggles are or what makes things harder for them. And so that has been a really cool thing, I think. It's been really, really good in sort of opening up a dialogue online about how to sort of take a step back and be like, okay, you don't have to say, like, you don't have to be right? Like it's sort of opened this understanding between people that there isn't a right, that there are viewpoints, and that you don't have to get embroiled in an argument. You can take the step back and say, I see what you're saying. And I love that we're going to be able to bring that to events eventually too. And my point is sort of weird, but I want to go back to the officer thing too with that, is that all of this stuff has been, been going behind the scenes. And then because none of us are getting that hot in-person high of being with each other and filling our hearts and our souls, the officers are dealing with that too. They're dealing with all these cranky people. And, in our kingdom, we had the added bonus of having our king removed like a week after our crown. So, not only were they serving for almost 2 years, Her Majesty had to serve the last 2.5 months by herself, living with the person that had been removed, and they're not married, but they're best friends. And to be able to like keep serving while you have that going on in the background, it's just sort of awe-inspiring in a way. But my point really is that there's so much happening behind the scenes that if you just are able to take some of the foundational beliefs of the DEI movement to heart and take a step back and really understand that everybody's looking at things and interpreting things from their own perspective, I think it's a lot easier to be chivalrous and courteous online and in person. And that I just think that's going to be really a big bonus for us when we all do actually get back together and as we get there.
Rauokinn, I couldn't agree with you more. Magdalena and I both feel very strongly on the inclusiveness. Diversity, equity, and inclusiveness are foundational. And anybody, I know that there are perspectives that I don't understand, and that I will always have to continue striving to be better, to understand those perspectives, and at least be accepting and think that, my perspective is limited to my experience. And the better we as a society can be, I've always felt that when the SCA is more inclusive, it's better because we get more interesting people. And there's a long ways we can go with this, but anybody who questions the value of diversity, equity, and inclusivity really should take a hard look at the virtues and consider they're the same. Thanks.
So as we've taken up these crowns from folks that have been on these thrones for a while, like I said, for us, getting heirs was a priority. I think we're about 6 weeks out from, or about 2 months out now, I guess, from our coronation. What's the plan for you guys to transition yourselves out? I know, Barekr, you ended up stepping up about 2 months later than you normally would have. Without going too deep into it, are you going to have a short reign, or what's your plan?
I think we're still kind of discussing different options. I think we're totally down with having a short reign. Right now, the biggest hurdle is a lack of bids for crown. So we're still kind of in that boat of don't know where it is or what day we have. It's kind of interesting. We were trying to make it so that so that we would be looking for heirs and holding our crown between two events that are not happening. So we were using that as kind of the timeline to inform our decisions. So right now it's definitely a little bit up in the air. We have a couple of people talking about options. We also are trying to maintain kind of a tradition of rotating north to south geographically in our kingdom to kind of create parity, not hold a bunch of stuff up north and a bunch of stuff down south. So trying to keep in those guidelines is definitely proving to be a hurdle. So
at some point you just got to have it where you can have it.
Exactly. And that may end up being what happens. We have a couple of options. We are also kind of in that we held our coronation just a little while ago, and so far doesn't seem like anything bad has happened. And that is going to hopefully continue to inform our ability to hold some events moving in the future. We already have our one event that was on the schedule other than golf was at the end of January, and that's now at the end of February. So, I mean, the way that Bela and Narissa did it, I thought was a really good method of handling it, which largely involved leaving it in many ways up to the people who are trying to plan the events, the people who are local to the area, right? Like, if less mandates from on high and more, do you feel like this is a bad idea? If you think this is a bad idea, then we will support you fully in not holding it. If you think that within the guidelines that have been set down and within what we know we can do safely, that we can have this event, then we absolutely want to have it, you know? So I think for me and Beatrice, we want to be the people that are open and excited while also recognizing and trying to combat, you know, event cancel fatigue, as you called it. You know, it totally sucks. And it's certainly changed kind of how we look at certain things. Like at this point now, you know, certain venues are right out because they have, you know, hard lines of cancel policies, to where now it's like, okay, given the fact that we might have to cancel, we can't go with you, because if I have to call you on Wednesday because all the autocrats and half the people have COVID or whatever, you know, the barony can't handle that. So that kind of narrows options pretty significantly. So there's a part of us that we're still kind of in a hopeful stage and looking to see what the next few weeks look like, you know, but that's how Bela and Narissa had to feel for much of their reign. And, right, you know, a few weeks go by and it's still the same. So we'll see.
Right on. So Rifkin, are you guys going to be able to hold May Crown?
We are very committed to holding May Crown. We actually, Barekr said something about, you know, letting, sort of not putting mandates from the top down and letting decisions sort of happen from the bottom up, like the people on the ground. And I think that it is something that we're sort of committed to as well, because those people have the best viewpoint, really.
Yeah.
And it seems sort of paternalistic to do it the other way. And especially when those are the people doing the work. But we are committed to having our events. And I want to talk a little bit like about what Barekr said earlier about pressure too. One of the reasons we've been so insistent about having live feeds from our events is that so that we can have accessibility for people that don't feel comfortable going or have health issues that they can't go, so that they can participate in the events, and maybe we can stop judging each other about our comfort levels. Like people that do feel comfortable going don't need to be judged by the people that don't feel comfortable going, and that we can all participate in the ways that we are comfortable doing. So that's something we're actually looking at. We have we call him our royal technomancer, who is helping us with our live courts.
I love that.
So that's something we're going to do forward. And, you know, we are totally committed to having May Crown. We have sites usually a year in advance. We have a site, and I don't think that they have fatigue yet. Like our 12th night team, poor them, they had to plan it 3 times. So our May Crown team isn't like that yet. And I think even if we have to be creative, like the East was with their crown, we are committed to going forward and having a changeover in July.
Okay. Hirsch?
Well, our crown tournament is scheduled for April, and I believe it's probably going to go forward, but it's still, that's a little too close to right now to be highly confident in that regard. You know, there's a couple other things. I'm just going to spill the beans. There's a chance we're going to change the kingdom calendar because there's a couple things that need attention. Calontir doesn't have.
Nobody's doing that. Don't worry about it.
A lot of people do it, but you know, when we reigned before, we thought we're going to make a small change, let somebody else make a small change, and incremental progress is the best way to fix the calendar. Well, that pretty much doesn't happen. Everybody's like, I'm just going to leave it the way it is because that's easiest. And so there's 2 motivations we have. One is to heirs at foreign wars. Our very first reign, 9 weeks after winning crown tournament, for the first time, Magdalena and I got to be prince and princess at Pennsic, and that was a blast. Anybody who thinks that being prince and princess is just not as good as being king and queen means they don't understand how much fun it is to be prince and princess. However, the other thing is we had a proposal from our equestrian and stele communities to add royal events for their martial activities. And that actually makes a tremendous amount of sense to us to put some equity in the calendar, because we have 2 royal events for Crown Tournament and 2 royal events for Coronation. And there's a royal event for archery. There are 2 royal events that are arts and sciences events. We should support our equestrian and stele with royal events. And that is probably going to happen. And frankly, it's going to have an effect on the schedule for our reign. But that's not yet finalized. So it's still a discussion that's in progress. But I'd give it a 90% chance that's going to happen. In terms of if there's a delay, I think if our reign, lasts somewhere in that time that's longer than 6 months, but hopefully less than 2 years, I think right now, I think I'm mentally prepared for that. Ask me in 9 months if I think that's acceptable or great. But I'm hoping that we're, that's the whole point of transitioning out of this, is that, I think that as long as we do a good job, then we're going to have a healthy Crown Tournament and healthy candidates to keep the kingdom healthy in body and spirit.
Yeah, you're talking about changing the calendar. We just ended up doing that as well, because again, while the pandemic was happening, there wasn't really any business to be done. But as soon as we won Crown, like Tuesday at fighter practice after that, I had Joe, member of the populace, say, "So, Your Highness, what about the calendar?" And we actually changed our kingdom law we reduced the number of events that our baronies have, so that we can have fewer events with greater participation. And this is one of those things that was driven by the populace. They came to us and said, after all this shutdown, and the calendar was, through nobody's fault, the calendar was like up in the air. I mean, it was totally up in the air, because we don't know if or when we can have events. And so everything that one group thought they might want to have, suddenly that's a virtual event. Or is it? Are we just going to cancel it? Or and so yeah, the calendar was totally up in the air. So for us, it was actually a really good time to kind of pick that up and responded to the request of the populace. And that's something that once we had our heirs, we were able to kind of get that ball rolling. So it's kind of interesting that you talk about changing the calendar. Like Barekr says, "Oh, who does that?" It's happening. And that's kind of one of those things that we find, coming out of all this is, we get to kind of, when we talk about getting back to normal, we also get to kind of reimagine what our events can look like now, right? And we were prepared coming into this to do a hybrid of either virtual or in-person events. We've been very fortunate that we've been able to have mostly in-person events for our reign so far. And for us, it was we had been doing live streaming previously. We have one of our ladies who has been just shows up in events, and she's using her own data and live streaming our courts. So that's something we've been doing for a while. We were prepared to do either virtual event or in-person event. We really didn't want to mix the two, because it really didn't seem to make sense to be able to it was kind of an either or in that case. But we were prepared to do that. We had one of our events a couple of weeks ago that got canceled, like pretty short notice too, because the Omicron thing just popped up, and it was a little too short to make that into a virtual event. But then we had another one at the end of the month that we could have done a virtual event for, but the group had decided to not do that. And that's the thing, is like these are all the things that keep popping up that like some of the stuff we anticipated, some of the stuff you just had no idea. And I know, like I said, we, as far as our transition, we have errors. It looks like we should be able to step down on time. But we knew going into this that was going to be a possibility that we could be on for, like Hirsch said, a little longer than 6 months, but something short of 2 years. And we're pretty fortunate that I think we'll be able to transition that out. And again with our priorities, and one of the reasons that we wanted to do this particular reign was to Barekr talked about this before we went live. Everybody should have that dream coronation, right? You should have that, especially that first coronation. Since you started fighting the SCA, you had this idea about what your coronation was going to be. And with the timeline that we had from our crown to our coronation, that's just not feasible. It's just not practical. Barekr, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, just kind of that whole idea of like, given the fact that we had a bunch of concerns, it was right during kind of the crazy Omicron spike. We had just a couple of weekends before that, before our coronation, we had, trying to remember, I don't think it was a 12th night, maybe a midwinter. We basically had to make the determination to cancel it like on Thursday before the event. And it was kind of one of those things where we had been watching and things were looking like they were kind of fine. And then one of the coordinators got COVID, and then another autocrat got COVID. And then we ended up just all getting on a conference call. And it was one of those situations, where we just talked to them and we're like, if this is not a good idea, you need to just tell us, because we're not there. And, and people are going to show up if we hold it. So let us know. And enough people were just like, this. I would feel remiss if we had this. And we're like, okay, so we didn't have it. And there were 3 elevations to peerages that we were going to do on that day. And so that was kind of a bummer. And so then we started talking, with the current crown, because we were prince and princess still, about whether or not that would, if we would do it once we stepped up, or, like how we could make this work. And we ended up, that was one of the times where we did pull out a virtual court. And it was really amazing to see the speed and, like ability that people had to kind of get the technology together, figure out a park to do it at. We had people to speak for each of the candidates, and it ended up being pulled off really well. Like, just another example of, I'm certain that was not how any of those candidates pictured, their elevation ceremony going, was, in a pergola, at a park, and anybody who was kind of close enough was able to make it. But just like with crown, I didn't have enough people to, I didn't have all the people that I wanted to be there, the people that I would think of over the years of who I've looked up to and who have been crowned when I've been crowned. And, and certain people weren't able to travel because it was far away, and certain people weren't able to travel because of the COVID stuff. But one thing I mentioned before was, I was kind of salty on Friday night when we got to the event, which, by the way, I love camping coronations. I want more camping coronations. But Friday night I was kind of salty and kind of thinking, woe is me, because it wasn't going to be the perfect coronation. But by about mid-morning on Saturday, it really started to change for me. And it became more perfect than I ever could have designed it in my head. And it was the people who were there at that moment. Hirsch said something really great in that discussion before we went live about how the legend is being written by us. And so sometimes you can wish other people were there. You can wish things were differently, but if you engage in the moment, the people who are around are there to be engaged in that moment with you. And if you accept that and reciprocate that with the people around you, you'll be really surprised by the amount of love and emotion that people you maybe don't even know that well have and can bring to the table. So I think that's what you were referring to.
Right on. Yep. All right. So we're coming up on the end here. So we're I want to thank everybody for watching. And again, this has been one of our first pre-recorded episodes. And we understand that as a coaching and training focused environment that the Coach's Corner is, we understand that, you know, this topic is perhaps a little bit off topic, but you gotta understand that if you're trying to be one of the best fighters in the world and you're trying to be a crown contender, and if you are doing the training that we do to try to be better fighters, these are the things you need to think about, because these are the things that you're going to run into this. And, you know, these reigns in particular, these ones that we're all in right now, these are unprecedented times, and all of us that have decided to do these reigns right now are going in eyes wide open. We understand, you know, what we're getting into, and like I said, it may not seem like one of our regular coaching type of episodes, but these are the things you need to think about if you're going to try to be one of the best. So we've got some final thoughts. We'll start with Hirsch.
Sean, I like that you brought it back to fighting, because one of the things about being in Crown Tournament is, as Duke Garrick has said, it's the crucible of honor, because you have to make your best decisions about whether a blow was good or not at the very same time when you want to deliver your best fight. And that's what we're stepping into as crowns. We want the most fun for everybody in the kingdom, everybody in the society. We want to make sure that people can have as much fun as they can. And as much as we don't want to admit that a lot of that might still need to be virtual right now, we'll take what we can get for that. But the essence of this is, if we say, yeah, let's go ahead with this event, and it's a bad idea to go ahead with that event, that's a bad decision. And as crowns, we want the most fun, and we have to try to make the best decisions about what's best for everybody. And that's the hard part, and it's week by week with these pandemic times. But I think that's the piece, that training yourself to make good decisions never goes out of style. Whether you're talking about being in Crown Tournament, whether you're talking about wearing the crowns, or whether you're talking about something completely different in your modern life, family life, it's a good idea to learn to make and to continue to improve making good decisions. And I hope that this conversation helps people to improve themselves however they choose. Thanks.
Yeah. Rauokinn.
So I guess I just want to say that, you know, when you're training, feedback's important, and it's important to open yourself up to other people's perspectives and ideas and different methods. And I want to say, you know, that's the same thing that I think all of us have to be open to right now, because we are in a different time, and we need to be creative. And I just want to encourage people watching that if you have ideas, share them with your crown. More brains are better than one brain. And, you know, part of our fealty oaths is to give feedback to the crown. And I know from my perspective, we welcome that. And if you can help the people that are reigning now, help, you know, build community and keep our kingdoms healthy, that is totally welcome.
Barekr.
More brains are absolutely better than one brain, and my brain is subject to blunt force trauma decently often. So that's absolutely huge. Like, more input from everybody. I think it becomes easy to let people who do the job well just continue to do it. And that's how you get somebody that's been in an office or doing some, or baron or baroness for forever, you know. Let's take the pressure off each other by spreading the work out more often, you know. And like what Sean said with the kingdom calendar, let's work on quality over the quantity that we can't have. You know, if we have to have less events, or if we have to move towards other technological avenues, the more invested we all are in it, the more likely it is to work well and get us where we're trying to go. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
All right. Yeah, more
Outlands.
Yeah, more brains being better than one brain is definitely, I like that, and again, that's why it was so important for us to establish errors as soon as we could, so that we could have more brains, so we could have, like I said, people that are directly invested in those decisions, that are helping that out there. So yeah. So this has been a great discussion. Really appreciate everyone joining us. Rauokinn, Hirsch, and Barekr, really appreciate all you guys being here tonight. And again, for those out there watching, let us know what you think about the pre-recorded episode. Hopefully it worked out all right for you. I know for Rauokinn and I, it's being busy crowns. It is. Actually, for all four of us, I expect this was easier to record on a Monday night than it is to do on a Friday night, trying to get to an event. So we got a lot going on, but so next week, our next episode is going to be coaching a student through a meltdown. So this is practical and effective methods for handling a student who's having an emotional breakdown during fighter practice or tournament. This is something that we see. I mean, it happens to everybody at some point, right? You get frustrated with your fight, or possibly with your opponent, and
that's why my helmet's a closed face, so you can't see the crack.
That's right. Can't see the tears streaming down my face. Yeah, I mean, so how to coach somebody through that, and kind of how to work people through having those times, and try to lead them on to being better fighters. So that's going to be next week. So pretty excited for that as well. So yeah, that's it. Appreciate everybody tuning in as always. Again, leave your thoughts and comments and questions in the comment section down below, and we will get back to you and answer any of those questions you might have. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next week.